Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a couple worm bins that are next in line for a feeding. It's only been 10 days since the last time we checked in on these African night crawlers. And at that time they were fed, I think it was feeding number 8, so today's feeding number 9 going in on day 87. I think that's pretty much all the vital stats about the system that I would normally share with you guys. African night crawlers do have a reputation for really liking bedding, and I've only got a couple African night crawler systems, but I've had them for long enough that I should be a little bit more tuned in to that disposition of theirs. And when I looked at the last feeding, I noticed that the only bedding they got with their feeding was one napkin and one coffee filter. That was all the bedding they got with their last feeding. And that was relative to, a typical feeding that amounts to about this much. And I think that the proportions are exactly opposite of what they should be. Most of the time people will tell you it's like a small portion of food, delivered with a fairly large portion of bedding. So it does feel to me like not only am I kind of failing to meet the general rule of thumb on proportioning bedding to food, I'm also kind of neglecting it in the system where the worms that would benefit from it the most live. So I want to try to make up for it. So today I'm going to give them the same suite of bedding type materials, plus we're going to repurpose this top covering, this old feeding zone indicator and a top covering newspaper and this piece of cardboard. I'm going to deliver all this down into their feeding zones today, and it's about time, because in previous check-ins we were even questioning, why is there a feeding zone indicator covered by a newspaper, covered by a cardboard, and then eventually also covered by a plastic? It just seemed like way excessive, and I think it's going to go to much better use as part of their feeding, So, and you know what? If I feel like it's not enough, I've also got my prepared bedding and a box of leaves. So we're going to be super generous with bedding today. I think that's the way to go. I mean, how can we expect our population of African night crawlers here to grow and expand if they don't sense that they've got, plenty of space into which they can move in? I mean, they'll also do the opposite. If they feel like they're crowded, they'll also sense that and, respond accordingly. And by that I just mean that they'll withhold mating and limit their population growth, just based on the sense that they're already kind of maximizing the available resources already, and that having more little wormies around would just put undue strain on the existing population. So it's so cool when creatures are able to pull that sort of stuff off, when you would think that they can hardly even figure out how to get out of their own way. So I just spotted a couple other bedding type materials and leftover food bits and this and that I figured I'd collect up, but I was oddly, but also I think very obviously, kind of avoiding the cucumber they got last time. When I rewatched the video, I even questioned, is the cucumber going to get breached and eaten? Because sometimes all that juicy goodness within the fruit or vegetable is kind of invisible to the worms, unless the skin or the peel or whatever of the food is already breached. But somehow they figured it out. There must have been a little hole or something. I doubt that they would have made their way through in pursuit of it. They would have needed access. But it did seem to me like they made it in there, and not only that, but the skin is almost completely intact, but empty of all the juiciness, all the juicy goodness that was inside of it. and only a couple little worms inside. I'm very curious though. I want to try something here, so let's see if this works. Oh, I thought I saw a hole, and I thought I might be able to blow some air into there and treat the whole thing as like a balloon. But I'm sure a lot of you are probably thinking to yourselves, all right, we get it, move on. So apologies for me just being a geek. So, you know, when we're dealing with brother bins or sister bins like these, it's fair to assume that what went to one bin went to both bins. And yep, there we go. Yet another little, probably hollowed out cucumber. I guess we're not, you know, we're not guaranteed exact situations when we've got brother bins or sister bins like this. So I think what we've got actually here is signs of a little bit of leftover remaining in this particular cucumber, with the worms busily studiously, diligently, they're definitely not letting anything go to waste. And you know, along that same lines of nothing going to waste, just because they're avoiding the skin right now doesn't mean they're not going to eat it. They're definitely going to eat it. But it might just be a little bit tougher than the other juicy goodness that was inside, so they might have to come back to it when it's ready to be consumed. But it is kind of interesting watching foods break down that have different elements to them, different fast and slow parts. But it's even more interesting when the worms do something like what they did here, which is just kind of like work right around the thing that they can't eat today to get out what they can, and then leave behind just an interesting little artifact of their feeding style. This thing is so cool too. I don't know, it's like some sort of a, I think what we saw last time was that it was probably the remains of a stem, the stump stem or whatever, of either a head of cabbage or a head of cauliflower. And it was kind of like, this was sort of an outer ring of a different type of material that was similar, but clearly not as hearty as this, because it's gone now. Alright, this is just turning into an interesting and fun check-in, so please please forgive me for being a little bit of a geek down here, but I think we are now ready to start piling in the foods that we're going to give them. So, you know, we got brand new replacement feeding zone indicators, which I'll put aside again, but that means we could take the old ones and use them as supplementary bedding down here in the feeding. And this is kind of how we started out the last feeding too, is where we laid in some stuff like this, and then we proceeded to start putting in foods. And I think we can get the leftover cucumber back down in there, but I think we can start coming in with a little bit of this frozen stuff. Perhaps we can even get into a few layers here, because remember, we wanted to use all this other stuff up too. So I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit of I guess there's carrot peel, and this is also that white carrot or parsnip or whatever it is. I think I've expressed my uncertainty in the name of that stuff on numerous occasions. I don't remember anyone ever correcting me, so I think I am talking about the right stuff and referring to it by the right name. So here we've laid in a good bit of bedding, and you know, I've got this big box of coffee here. Why don't we throw a little bit of that in here too? And before I forget, we can give them grit as well. So let's continue on with perhaps another yummy handful of food sprinkled in. And now this nice big piece of cardboard. I don't know, perhaps I'll see if I could test my dexterity with a single hand to see if I can proportion this piece of cardboard to fit better into this space. I think we did a good job there, and I think just by being surrounded by all this delicious food, this cardboard just somehow doesn't seem like it stands a chance. I think it's going to be demolished by the next time we come in here. What do you guys think? Man, we still got so much food to sprinkle in here, and we're even coming in with a little bit of frost. All right, why don't we just give them what remains. That looks looks pretty cool. But since I've already come out here with my prepared bedding, why don't we make sure we give them some of this too. And you know, in order to get this feeding zone covered up appropriately, I do believe we're going to have to turn to the outskirts of the systems to pull in some material with which we can cover up these feeding zones. But I think what we've done here is probably going to benefit the system. This is only a little, these strange little rope kind of handles that they put onto the paper shopping bags. I've got a few of them in here in both systems. All right, yeah, very nice, very nice. I think the moisture seems okay in this system. I think I was checking in on a pair of systems yesterday where one of the two systems was just completely swamped. But with these systems, I think, you know, since we've been managing them identically since the get-go, they're most likely going to be very similar to one another. And you know, I got to remind myself that we don't have to go too crazy worrying about covering up the feeding zone as thoroughly as I usually like to, because we're also coming in with the top dressing of leaves, which the system's going to like a lot too, because next time we come in here, all those leaves will just get blended in with the bedding everywhere, and just going to make for a really nice environment for the worms. I guess if I had to compare, I would say bin number 2 definitely has more moisture. You can see it, I could feel it, and I can also just tell from the presence of more worms hanging out down there in that moisture. So I think just for the sake of keeping things a little bit more even, if possible, I guess we're just going to try to supplement moisture over in bin number 1 a little bit with my squirt bottle. And you know, this is also a very good opportunity for me to return a lot of this lovely material sticking to my glove back down to the bin. And this thing's pumped up pretty good. It's got a nice charge in it, so it's dispensing a fair bit of liquid quite quickly here. I don't want to go overboard. I think what we've done right there is probably a good way to bring the level of the moisture over here in bin number 1 up to a comparable level to what we see in bin number 2. What do you think? Did I get them more in sync with each other? Oh wow, we're out of leaves. I think I came close. Even if we didn't do perfectly, I think we probably came pretty close. Well, I thought I had many more leaves. I think I've been pretty generous with the leaves in most of my systems lately. But still, that looks pretty cool. And that stuff's going to go very nicely, getting blended in with the bedding next time we come in here, after which it'll become like prime bedding and food, if you ask me. Not just bedding, but you know, this is pretty much the types of food that worms love. But that brings us to the end of the video. Let's not forget to cover up the feeding zones, or mark the feeding zones with our feeding zone indicators. And wow, this one's really brittle. Just wants to tear everywhere. So as we cover up with the plastic, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks so much for watching. Bye now.